Thank you, Bishop Kelly. I'm not sure if you've got a bishop or
No.
a pastor, he's a missionary. Whatever needs to be done, that's what he is here to do. And we admire and appreciate the work that the Kellys have done for many years here in Scotland and the UK. I feel honored to be able to participate in this session this morning. I've had a great time ministering to the, I guess they were all first-year students in the homiletics class for the past 2 weeks. So I've been in Scotland for 2 weeks, just long enough to get over jet lag, and then tomorrow going back home to get right back into jet lag. So conflict management is the topic that we're looking at today, and I would like to just begin by making this statement that conflict resolution is based on understanding. If you attempt to resolve any conflict without understanding all the elements, all the factors involved, then you're probably going to make a mistake. There will be some areas that are perhaps troublesome, something seething beneath the surface that will be untouched. And it will not go away. It will stay there and continue to burn, and then at some point, no doubt, it will erupt again. So if you do not have understanding of the conflict, then you're probably not going to do an effective job in resolving it. This is based on Proverbs chapter 4, and I'd like to just begin with the first verse and read down to verse 7. Proverbs chapter 4, I'm reading out of the King James Version. Hear ye children the instruction of a father, and attend to no understanding. For I give you good doctrine, forsake ye not my law. For I was my father's son, tender and only beloved in the sight of my mother. He taught me also, and said unto me, let thine heart retain my words, keep my commandments, and live. Get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not, neither decline from the words of my mouth. Forsake her not, she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. With all thy getting, get understanding. And so that's really where we are in terms of conflict resolution, is at this beginning point. And my audience today, of course, all of you are the helpers and not the helpees. But I probably am going to address the helpees. And you need to make that transition in your mind that I'm not necessarily talking about you and your problems, but helping you to understand the people that you will minister to who have problems. It will sound like perhaps I'm talking to you, but just try to make that adjustment in your mind as we progress today. Let's talk about first of all about conflict versus disagreement. Conflict versus disagreement. Disagreement may be just somebody's perspective. It may be personality. It may be a misunderstanding. It may be misinformation. And so people can disagree. And you've heard the statement, you can disagree without being disagreeable. And that's because it's usually not a deep thing. It's just simply difference in thinking about something. and it can be resolved quite easily. Conflict, however, is major. It is deep. It's emotional. It may be cultural. It may be systemic. So a conflict then is something that requires much understanding and requires deep consideration and moving toward something that we call forgiveness. So using those principles that I've just outlined for you as a premise, I'd like to separate these sessions into three different categories. Number one is conflict in families. And the reason for that is because much of the conflict that we have in other areas, number one, stems from conflict in families, the way people were acculturated, the way people were raised with certain beliefs and attitudes, and that then carries over into the way they live life, into the decisions that they make, the direction they go, their values in life. No doubt come from their experience growing up in their family. But the second reason I want to talk to you about this is because your church body, your congregation, is oftentimes made up of families. Sometimes even a church of maybe 100 or 150, you could count them by the number of families, maybe 20 or 25 families that make up 150 people. And so you don't minister simply to the individuals of 150. More than likely you are ministering to families. And the reason for that is that when you say something that would be specific to a family problem, guess what mom is going to do? She's going to look at dad. And guess what dad's going to do? He's going to look over at mom. And guess what son and daughter are going to do? They're going to look back at mom and dad, because all of them there's a group think. There is a family philosophy, if you will, that they share. And so it's not as though if you have four members of the family, that you have four different ways of thinking. You have probably just one way of thinking that all four of them participate in. And so when you pastor, when you assist, when you have any leadership capacity in a church, you are most likely going to be dealing with family situations. And family situations in a church are extremely sensitive and relevant to the spiritual health, let alone the psychological and emotional health of the church. So I want to talk first of all then about conflicts in the family, how they get started and why they keep going. And I will try to get through this in the allotted amount of time, but I do want to preface this by saying we're not here to inflict pain deliberately, but we are going to, if we're going to address family problems honestly, then we have to talk about things that may dredge up some bad memories and some traumatic events that perhaps you have tried to bury and then move on. We hear today a lot about fractured families. A columnist for many years ago, it was called Dear Abby. There was Dear Ann Landers, and then Dear Abby. And they were sisters, by the way. But someone wrote in to Dear Abby and said, "I live in a crazy family, can you get me out?" Signed, Hopeless. So, I'm not going to ask the question of you, but just ask you, maybe rhetorically, how many come from dysfunctional families? There's not much fun in dysfunctional. There used to be a series of television programs that supported the family, that affirmed the family, like Father Knows Best, and Leave It to Beaver, and Ozzie and Harriet, and the Waltons. And then in the 90s, maybe even before that, but in the 90s, there were programs called Married with Children, and The Simpsons, and Arrested Development. I'm not real familiar with all of those programs, only to know that they began to show that the family wasn't what it was always assumed to be before, that there were major problems. So let me ask you, or see if you find these statements to be familiar as families go. I'm sick and tired of having to do everything every single day around here. Mother says, I know you're upset, sweetie, but your daddy really does love you. And remember, this never happened, right? Or a kid will say in their teenage years, well, I'll never have a family like this. And the mother will defend herself, defend her family by saying, don't get the wrong idea. We are a very loving and caring family. And the son may say, or even the father may say, they treat me like an outsider. And they would respond, well, I don't know, he just never fit in. Or maybe the mom will say, we can't go home right now, maybe in another couple of hours. Or the father will say, she does love you, she's just tired, let's go get her some flowers. Or the mom will say, I'll go to your graduation by myself, Dad just doesn't like big crowds. Or mom will say, your father can never find out about this. Or she will say, everything's fine, it's just the way our family is, don't worry about it. These are just symptoms, some statements that kind of illustrate what happens in families. You cannot simply resolve those kinds of problems in 5 minutes. You can't just say, well, that's stupid, or that's silly, or you need to stop thinking that way. If a person has been raised to think a certain way for 15, 20 years, 25 years, you can't assume that in 5 minutes you're going to be able to say, stop thinking that way, start thinking this way. It's too deep. It's gone on for too long. There are so many things that have happened. It's like the roots of a tree. They have gone so deep, and now the trunk has come up, and now the branches have come out, and there are a lot of things that have happened as a result of those core feelings. We need to understand all of that and how it happens. Let's look at the family just to get a perspective from the scripture, the family in the Bible. God arranged for us to grow up and live together in families. That's the way He arranged it. Families are the foundation of society. It's where we come into the world. It's where we're nurtured and given the tools to go out into the world, capable and healthy, or not. While families have the greatest potential for raising healthy individuals, they can also wound their members in ways that will never heal. When families break down and fail to provide the healthy nurturing that we need, the effects impact not only our lives but our communities. So God used families to establish His kingdom in the world. Genesis 2:18, and the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him and help meet for him. 1 Corinthians 11:3, But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. So we also then see representative Bible families. Adam and Eve, and Cain and Abel, and then Seth. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Jethro, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, Saul, David, Solomon. See, these were not just individuals. They were related. They were members of families. And so that's why it's important for us to begin to understand the underlying cause of problems. Either it is the cause of a problem, or it's the cause of something that's good. In other words, two different outcomes exist within the same family structure. Dr. Jerry Smucker spoke in our church a number of years ago, and he talked about a set of twins, twin boys, that grew up, and their father was an alcoholic. One of the twin boys became a doctor. The other was an alcoholic and just a homeless and shiftless kind of person. Both of these twin sons were interviewed later on in life, and this is what they said. To the one son, who was a doctor, they said, "How, knowing the father you had, how did you turn out to be a doctor?" He said, "Well, you said it right. Knowing the father I had, how could I do anything different than become a doctor?" The other son was asked the same question. And he said, "You want to know why I'm like what I am? Knowing the father I have, how could I turn out to be any different?"
That's interesting.
So, both outcomes, totally opposite, stem back to their reaction, their response to their father. Family systems are important then, because a family is more than just simply the immediate father, mother, son, and daughter. It is also extended into grandchildren, and many times into aunts and uncles and cousins. In its smallest sense, a family system is the nuclear family working together in a secure, functioning environment with well-understood roles, responsibilities, and boundaries, all experiencing the bond of deep love and care for each other. Well, this becomes a little more complex in the extended family. Traditions, expectations, morals, beliefs, customs, actual differential behaviors impact the family in many ways. A dysfunctional family results from a loss or distortion of one or more of these elements. When this happens, the working order of the family not only breaks down, individual members may suffer profound personal disorders. So, just as a side comment, kind of a commentary on what I'm telling you, is that the problem that you may have to deal with, the conflict that has now come to a point where you have to be, or at least attempt to resolve it, is no doubt a product of an entire system and way of thinking in a family. So it needs to be understood. Describing the family, they're a related group of biologically, emotionally interconnected people. And they're relating how? Not just a collection of individuals, but interacting, reacting, and influencing each other in different ways, in different contexts. And if you would stop and think about it, there's probably one word that you might use to describe your family. It could be faithful. It could be laugh. It could be work. It could be love. It could be loyal. It could be help. Spiritual. talk. Any one of those things, and perhaps many more, could be used as a single word to describe, this is basically what we do. We talk. Or when we get together, we laugh. Or fight. Welfare. That is poverty. Drink. Lie. Abuse. Silent. Leave. Those are also words that can be used to describe many families. So how does a family really work? Well, there are family myths. These are the things that are spoken, they're verbalized, but really don't have much to back it up. We always go on vacation. They've done it twice. We always go to church. Once a month, sometimes more. Grandpa was a war hero. Well, he was a private first class. We treat everyone the same. The prettiest girl is favored. We have a very close family. We don't talk to each other. And then there are family secrets. Those are the things that are not spoken, not verbalized. Alcoholism, drug abuse, abusive behavior, illegitimacy. Some of these things are changing in our culture of the 21st century. Illegitimacy is not frowned upon as much anymore. However, school is not out on the impact it has on the child. We may not condemn the mother as much or ostracize the mother. It used to be that when a teenager, unwed teenager got pregnant, she was shipped off to a home. One home in our local community was called the Florence Crittenden Home. And she had disappeared for, however long it took. Might have been 3 months along before she went, so she wasn't around for 6 months. And you make up excuses why she's off visiting her grandparents or whatever. And then the child was put up for adoption, and the mother came back home. So nobody would know. That was the thing. Well, now that's it's almost a badge of honor to have a baby. And in fact, I don't know if I think I mentioned this later on in this section, but it's almost like I've got to have a kid to be, fulfilled. But the child needs to have more than just simply, I'm here because my mom wanted to have a kid. It should be something much deeper. I'm here because my mother and father valued me and wanted me. They wanted to have a person in this world that could carry on the principles and the truth and the love that they have. There are some ways that we try to resolve conflict, but actually it ends up as coping. Not resolving, but coping. One of these coping mechanisms is denial. Denial is nothing is wrong. When everything is absolutely wrong, the insistence is there's nothing wrong. Or projection, another coping mechanism. Projection, that is, we will find a scapegoat, someone who's least liked in our family. They're going to bear the brunt of this. Or a coping mechanism called sabotage. That is, they will fight change, because change sometimes upsets the apple cart. In fact, most times it will, and it's seen as destructive rather than constructive. If you would like to build a house on a hilly piece of ground, you're going to have a bulldozer come in and create a flat place where you at least sink the footers and have a foundation. If you're going to resolve conflicts in a family, some bulldozers are going to be necessary. Some rearrangement of basic beliefs are going to happen. And some people fight change because they see the bulldozer method as disrupting their peace. And then there is something called triangling. If you've heard of this, called triangulation. Triangling, it means you enlist an ally, somebody else who will share your belief with them, and then the two are against one. So it's a way of not resolving it because somebody else sides with me, and the other person that sides with me makes my case stronger, so we're not going to change. And then another coping mechanism is keeping secrets. Keeping secrets. And that's the code of silence. Just so that we don't continue to bog down here in all the family problems, we'll just mention this, how families impact our lives. If you have a personal sense of well-being, it probably came as a result of the way you were raised in your family. Your choices in education, in vocation, and profession may have had to do with your family experience. Your marriage, your children, your residence is probably the way the family has impacted your life. Your beliefs and philosophies and life scripts are the result, no doubt, of the way you were raised. It's important to look some at Bible families. Just briefly, what we call a genogram. A genogram is the way to chart out the flow of family in terms of generations. So in Bible families, this is interesting. In each generation, one son had to leave the family. Ishmael was forced out by Rachel's jealousy. Jacob left for fear of his life. Joseph was sold into slavery. It's very interesting how this happens. And then because of this, or the cause of this, are splits and alignments. People in the family getting together and conspiring against someone else. Abraham and Isaac against Ishmael, Isaac and Esau against Rebekah and Jacob, Jacob and Joseph against the other sons. And so each succeeding generation failed to learn from the past. A family is not just for your happiness. A family is for others. And as I said before, young women should not say, I want to have a baby. Young men should not say, I want a kid. They should say, I accept the challenge of placing another human being into society and of receiving an eternal soul into my care and trust. Let's talk now about resolutions to these conflicts. Why are families hard to fix? One situation or one factor is pride, refusal to admit wrong in actions and ideas. In the face of all reasoning and logic, this person will not allow himself or herself to be cornered into an admission of guilt or into faulty ideas. This person wears unreasonable pride as a badge of honor. The Bible calls it a chain and contention. Psalm 73:6, therefore pride compasseth them about as a chain, and violence covereth them as a garment. Proverbs 13:10, only by pride cometh contention, but with the well-advised is wisdom. So, is keeping your pride worth ripping your life to shreds? Is losing face worse than losing family? Is your stony silence effective in healing your family? Then there's a factor of fear. Fear that a person might be ridiculed or disrespected. This person cannot talk about the problem because of the repercussions it will bring. And he or she will not risk the humiliation. To be seen as a fool is worse to them than fixing the dysfunction. And so look at Hebrews 2:15, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Then 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. I'll just mention the rest of these in this particular list of factors that resist fixing. Ignorance, which is gross misunderstanding of the origin of the conflict. Falsehoods, misconception of how a family should function. I will stop and say this. There are some families who think that abuse is normal, that children should be seen and not heard, that the wife or the mother is a manipulator, that the husband or the father is the supreme king, that in-laws' opinions rule. So, and then another factor is self-centeredness. Maximizing one's own feelings and minimizing others' feelings. What that means is, if I'm sad, everybody's sad. If you're sad, get over it. If I like it, that's it. If you like it, you're stupid. Job 34:26 and 27, he striketh them as wicked men in the open sight of others, because they turned back from him and would not consider any of his ways. And then low self-esteem, short-sightedness, failure to see where there's conflict. If you keep this up, folks, your family is going to disintegrate. They cannot see where it's going to eventually lead. And then the factor of bitterness, anger and hatred that will paralyze the healing process. And then the factor of interference, third-party opinions that will disrupt the home. And finally, a hidden agenda. And I think this probably is, in my experience, has been one of the worst things. That is no interest in resolution, because he or she wants a different outcome. If a man is dead set on divorce, you can, and he probably will not come in and counsel. But even if he does, there is no way he's going to change his mind, even in the face of every situation, every scenario that is against him and that makes him look foolish, and his decision to look stupid. He will not budge. You say, well, how can that happen? Well, believe me, it does happen. I attempted to resolve the difference between a man and his wife. There was no way that the thing